Our first guest speaker is a teacher, author, and creative director from Lexington, Kentucky. A lifelong writer, he got his professional start printing and passing out packets of poems he authored to his fellow middle school students. Join me in welcoming Julian Thomas. Our next guest is a USA Today best-selling author who wants to infuse readers' lives with the unique magic, far-flung fantasy settings, and romance. Her inspiration springs from an obsession with history, years of world travel, and the fantasy she grew up reading when she was supposed to be doing her math homework. Welcome, Alisha Klapheke. And finally, our moderator today is a full-time freelance writer and editor who has worked in media and publishing for more than 20 years, most recently as the editor-in-chief and now editor-at-large of Writer's Digest. Welcome, Ericka McIntyre.
Are we on? Oh, hey, hi, hot mic here. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you here today. And for this great celebration of production, but we have Alisha Klapheke with this book. This is actually the first book in a series, is it not? And you've already done 2 more in this series since this one came out. And then Julian, who I don't have enough hands, is the author of the Blackheart series. This is an amazing graphic novel series. So big ups for that. And make sure you pick up a copy before you leave today. Let's see. So now we've all gotten introduced. We'll just dive in with some questions. We're here today to talk about the ups and downs of being a self-publisher. I assume that if you're in this room, you either love self-published books or want to be a self-published author yourself, or maybe you already are a self-published author yourself and you're wondering how to succeed at same. So we have 2 people here today who are highly successful self-published authors, and I work as a consultant to self-published authors, and my whole raison d'etre is to help them succeed. So let's jump into our first question here for both of you. How did you decide to self-publish and not go the traditional route? Or did you want to go the traditional route and then later decide to self-publish? What was your self-publishing journey?
Okay. Oh, my microphones. I am not used to that. Okay, so I started off with the traditional publishing route. I was heavily involved and still am with the SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators for the Mid-South, and enjoyed working with editors and agents and other authors. And I even got an agent. But as I started moving through the process of having a book on sub, I just really wanted to move a lot faster than they were. And I also like to write exactly what I want to write. And I want to make my own deadlines. I don't think there's anything wrong with whatever way you want to do things. It's all cool. But I just felt this like calling, and then I started listening to these self-publishing podcasts and like talking to people that were making it work for them. And I just knew this was the right move for me. So I loved my agent. She's wonderful, but I said bye and I decided to go for it.
Excellent. What about you, Julian?
So check. Okay. Yeah. So before I started writing Blackheart, I was a recording artist. So I traveled, touring, festivals, all this type of stuff. So my entire background is kind of like an indie self-published, except in music route, super hands-on, super grassroots, something that's very important to me. Doing this before I even started to do the comic, but even still now, is being able to create community, So when you're doing stuff like this, or at least in my opinion, whenever you're doing something art, you want your art to land with the people that it's going to resonate the most with. And I find that in my experience, the easiest way to find and connect with those people is going out and connecting with them yourself, And then when I actually had the idea for Blackheart, it wasn't even originally meant to be a comic book. I wanted it to be straight to animation, So as I'm going to these different places and I'm shopping stuff around, a lot of the different places that made offers were like, yeah, so we think this is a good idea, but because you're new in this field, we feel like it's more of a it's safe as a safer financial investment for us to have you do a comic first. It's less expensive. Let's do that. Then as I'm like, okay, I'm entertaining this idea, and then I find out more, and they're like, and beyond that, we also need to see that you can create a fan base and develop a buzz on your own. So I'm like, all right, so if I'm creating a comic book because it's less expensive, and if I'm having to go out and do all the legwork myself, what is the purpose in me splitting the money that I'm making? So I was like, all right, yeah, I'll do it myself.
And that's actually, that's the truth. A lot of people think that if you get a traditional publishing deal, that means that they're going to put all this marketing and sales effort behind you. That's not necessarily so. You're still going to have to hustle, even if you are traditionally published. So if you would like to keep the profits for yourself, the DIY route may be the way to go. But you do have to understand, and I think this is something that's important, and I always emphasize this to my clients. You're not just publishing a book. You're starting a business. You're starting a self-publishing enterprise. If you think about what a publisher, the word publisher is a job title at a publishing house. That person decides what gets published, and that person oversees a team of people who editorial, design, marketing, sales, all of it. You have now started a business. You're not just putting a book out, but you're starting a publishing business, and you need to run it like a business. And you need to give it the energy and investment that you would give to a business, because that's exactly what it is. And that's a big key to success. If you run it like a business, your chances of success are much greater than if you feel like, oh, I'm just going to do a book. You're not really doing a book. You're starting a business. And so that leads me to my second question. What was the hardest thing about starting your own publishing business? And how did you overcome whatever that obstacle was? And what was the most surprising thing to you about starting your own publishing enterprise?
So I remember the first thing you said. What was the hardest thing? Okay, the hardest thing is all the information, really, because when you start educating yourself, like she's saying, it's running a business. You really are. It's like ads and a designer and formatting, and there's a lot of software. I am not a techie person. I read paperbacks, and I'm 45. So there was just so much to learn. I've watched a lot of YouTube, guys. Listened to so many podcasts for 2 years. It's an education. So the hardest thing was figuring out what to take the time to learn and what to hire out, and being patient with that process, I think.
So for me, a lot of the obstacles that I hear from peers of mine or other people who've taken a self-publishing route, you can look at it as a pro or a con, but I went through a lot of that stuff, figure out what works for me with music. So I kind of knew how I wanted to approach things. With writing books specifically, I think the biggest hurdle for me was what I was mentioning earlier about the community. I think that sometimes as artists, at least in my peer group, we see a group of fans or tastemakers, and we want these particular people to be fans of the stuff that we're creating. When the biggest hurdle for me was realizing that, hey, I just need to cater to the people that are drawn to me, rather than me potentially, maybe sacrificing some of the artistic integrity that I have because I think is going to get me into this particular circle or this particular demographic. That was a huge psychological thing for me that I had to overcome. And once I realized, all right, if I'm doing what I want to do and what makes me happy, the people who are going to gravitate toward that are going to allow me continue doing what makes me happy. If I'm not satisfied with doing this, but I'm like, okay, I'll do it because it's going to get me with these folks, those folks are going to keep wanting me to do that. And then I wouldn't be satisfied.
So you hinted on this in your answer. What should you take the time to learn how to do for yourself as a self-publisher, and what should you potentially hire out? And I think that's something that is challenging to a lot of self-publishers, because you're a writer, you have a creative idea, but you're not necessarily a marketing person or a designer. You don't necessarily know how to format an ebook for Amazon. There's a lot that goes into a book. There's many, many parts. You can't proofread your own book, for example, right? So how did you decide how you would make that call? Because it is vitally important that you do all of the steps in book production if you want your book. If done correctly, a self-published book and a traditionally published book on the same shelf to the average consumer, there's no difference. You can't tell the difference. And that's if it's done professionally and done right. So how did you decide what you were going to take the time? Because as a self-publisher, you have two things. You have time and you have money. Which one do you want to spend? So how did you choose?
There's
how
also
you're
how much
best-
hair you want to lose.
Well, yeah, exactly. The stress level
and
too.
how much
exactly.
drinking is going to be
Exactly.
involved.
How did you make those choices?
So it's trial and error for sure. Like you're gonna mess it up a lot and figure out, and you learn from that. And there's no way you can do it perfectly and lay it out. Here is my plan. Like it's not gonna happen. So I just tried to look at myself objectively, like I was my own employee. So my undergraduate is in marketing. So I'm fascinated by marketing. Of course, I graduated college a while ago, and like it wasn't internet market, but some of the stuff still holds true. And I knew my interest was there. Like interest is key in learning things. If you're interested in something, you learn about it, you get good at it. So my interest was there in marketing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to learn ads. I'm going to learn, how to write a blurb and do ad copy and stuff like that. Because I went to college for that. Like I should be at least a little bit, capable of that. It took longer than it should have. Anyway, but like other stuff that I didn't know about, like I'm not a visual artist. Like I'm an artist with my words, but I'm not with anything visual. Like in Pictionary, you don't want me on your team. Like, no. Okay. So I hired out, like I would look at books I liked and I would hire their artists. And I would, for formatting inside the book, I hired that out before Vellum existed, but there's a program called Vellum. May it always be around. It is the best, totally worth it program ever. So it is so user friendly. I am not good at that sort of stuff. So I just tried to if there was an easy fix that I could understand, like a Wix website, I can do that. Anybody can do that if you try.
I have a
hard
Wix
enough.
website.
Right. So I do that and I do the Vellum and it's easy. But if it's anything harder than that, I'm hiring it out. I'm hiring an editor because duh. You might say, oh, my stuff's pretty good. Well, then that's your first step is to learn. No, it's not.
That's funny that you say that. I actually lost a job because I was up way too late trying to figure out how to design my Wix website. Ended up oversleeping and not making
it's
it
not
in on
easy.
time.
Don't let me pretend I didn't sweat. I was
So for me, I would say that as far as what to learn, everything. And when you're trying to figure out what to hire out or what to commission, I think the first step in that is being able to put your ego aside. So the reason that I say learn everything is because in order for you to hire the correct person, you need to make sure that you know what you need that person to do. For example, I have a video game in the works, and I've been looking at different video game designers and coders and that type of stuff. And as I was initially reaching out to people and looking to commission folks for certain things, and they're like, all right, so what exactly do you want me to do? And I'm like, make a video game. So there are several different things. You don't know how much you're supposed to pay. You don't know exactly what the workload is going to be, how long the turnaround time is going to be. So it's important that even if you don't do it yourself, to at least understand it so you can know who to go to. And the reason that I say put your ego aside is, we all have a standard. Like we know what a professional, good quality book looks like. So, or feels like, or smells like, what have you. So if you have this standard and then you look at yourself, if you can put your ego aside, like you said, objectively look at yourself and be like, hey, what I'm doing is not meeting the standard that I have, that's when you need to hire someone else for it. At the end of the day, if you're the writer, you wrote it, so you don't necessarily have to be the person that draws the cover or maybe writes the copy for your Instagram ads, that type of thing. As long as you understand how it works, you can figure out the person who can best do that for you.
Actually, speaking of Instagram, social media is something that trips lots of authors up. I think many of us have a love-hate, mostly hate with social media. And it's challenging. It's its own animal. So I wanted to ask both of you, what has been your social media strategy as a self-publisher, and what has worked for you and maybe what has not worked as well with your social media strategy?
So for me, Instagram is the social media that I use primarily. That's where I generate most of my web sales from. So Instagram is like a full-time job, the same way that we're saying that you got to research this. So different marketing techniques and formatting and all this different stuff. You need to understand Instagram as well. There's an algorithm. It responds in a particular way. It acts in a certain way. So you have to learn this stuff. For me, what I've realized what works is consistency. Making sure that you're able to put out content, which has its own set of downsides of feeling this compulsion to have to keep putting content out. But consistency matters, and making sure that you're catering to your niche. The same thing that I'm saying about developing community and finding this community. If you're doing stuff that appeals to a certain community, the folks who are members of that are going to eventually gravitate towards you. So it's making sure you're staying consistent and knowing who you're talking to. If you know who you're talking to and you know what your goal is and you stick with that, that's a really, really great way to grow your Instagram presence or your social media presence in general.
So I'm not a good example of this. I get the overwhelm very, very, very easily. And I stress out if someone makes a comment, I will sit there and stare at it and be like, what do I do? Do I heart it? If I do that smiley face, will they think I'm old? I don't know. I really am not a good example. So if you look me up on social media, just know oh, don't copy her. Okay. Now, honestly, when I come to things like this, where I don't want to hire that out, really, for me, when I'm having trouble with something, I go with genuine. Okay. I just want to be a genuine person and be me. So my social media, now our business setups are very different. We're both, indie or whatever you want to call it, but our business plans are very different. So you have to think about that with your business plans. I'm not making sales on Instagram like he is. I don't sell direct. All of my stuff basically is through Amazon. I make my full-time living off Amazon ebooks. So as long as I'm doing that and I'm doing my ads, my social media is like icing, so it's really more of a place that if you're a fan of me and you see this, you're like, oh, look, that's where she took a walk. Oh, look, her cat, but I hire out people that do know what they're doing to do cover reveal blasts with a whole bunch of bookstagrammers. And then some of those people are on the book talk, which I did 4 of those videos and then quit. So I'm not a good example, but I know kind of I just try to be myself.
I think that's the key to social media. And there's 2 things I would emphasize to any author about their social media. If you are not going to use it, don't use it. You don't have to be on every single platform all of the time. Pick the one that you like. I mean, for you, it makes sense that you're selling over Instagram because your work is so visually inspired. But, you might be a Twitter person. You might be a Facebook person. Whatever it is, pick one and stick to it. Feed it regularly. And be the authenticity thing, that's key, because the minute that your followers think that you're just giving them a sales pitch with your social, they tune out. It's your sales pitch is for your ad copy and that sort of thing. It's not for social. Social media at its heart is a conversation. It should be a conversation, and you should run it that way. If you ran into somebody in a bookstore and started talking to them and they just started sounding like an advertisement that they would see on Amazon, you're not going to talk to that person for very long. So, there's a human being behind the social. Be that human being and give your readers, your followers, that authenticity. I think that's a key to success with social. And I think it is overwhelming. And that's why I always tell the authors that I work with what I said a minute ago. You do not have to be on every platform all the time. Pick the one that you're the most comfortable with and that you'll feed, and do that and focus there.
Yeah, see, I like Instagram because you can just pop a picture up there. Yeah. I'm not doing algorithm I'm not fancy. He's right about all that, but I can't even. So I just put a little thing up there and hey, y'all, the end, so yeah. I don't try hard, but you can Instagram, you just pop something up there. And I have a Facebook group too, and they are actually pretty active with me, but I'm just get on there and I'm like, hey guys, so I put this book on Goodreads. Can y'all put it on your shelf so I don't have nobody on there, yeah. So they're kind of like my mini family. So there's community. Different places that are different purposes for me. That makes sense.
And just to build on what Ericka was saying, as far as finding out which platform works best for you, it's very, very common to see an artist, no matter what the medium is, who has maybe million followers on Instagram, and then you go to their Twitter and they have 6,000, so Instagram is what works for them. And also remember, it is social media. So while there are some differences, the same way as the authors are here and we rub shoulders and we say, hey, I like your stuff, that's the equivalent of going and commenting on someone's pictures. So the same way that you will be maneuvering not in the exact same way, but in a similar way that you maneuver through real life and actual in-person social gatherings, is the same way that you would try to approach the Instagram. So the Instagram, the same way you would try to approach it, So if there's someone that you enjoy and they're posting something, show your face, talk on it, because also, going back to what I was saying about community, there may be other people who are fans of this person who can become introduced to you through the fact that you're interacting with someone that they're already a fan with. Everything is all interconnected. You just have to, something that I didn't mention is that for the introvert, self-publishing can be a much larger obstacle. If you don't particularly gravitate toward interacting with other people and talking to people, it can be harder, but it is a necessity.
It's still possible, though.
Definitely
still
possible.
possible.
Yeah, I mean, I have my ups and downs when I don't want to leave my room and stuff, but
it just takes more work. Honestly, it does, but it can be. You can get there. Especially, and that's why it's especially important to focus so that you don't overwhelm yourself, particularly if you are an introvert. That's really key. That leads me actually to another question I had. What do you think is critical for anyone who is considering self-publishing to know about the business themselves? What do you think is a personality trait that a self-publisher really needs or should really have or should try to hone?
Go ahead.
You have to be willing to grind, and you have to be willing to sacrifice. There have been so many times, like, for instance, like if I want a cover art done, I have a particular standard for my cover art, and I needed to meet that. If the artist that I plan to commission for this cover cost the same amount that my rent is going to cost this month. Now, this might not be the situation for everyone, but this is for me specifically. My rent's going to be late, and that might reflect in late fees, or I might end up having to sleep on my homie's couch. But you have to be willing to make those sacrifices and grind to be able to do this, because while you do have more control over it, you have more freedom. There's nobody else footing the bill, and the bill has to be foot, so you have to be willing to put stuff on the line to be able to do it.
I think you also that's totally you have to be a little bit of an insane workaholic to do this and do it well. But see, that's a decision too that you have to make. I mean, the beauty of self-publishing is anyone can do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got some learning there, but anyone can do it. And if you just want it to be a hobby, that's awesome. Just pop your books up there and have a good time. But don't be sad when one person buys it and it's $2 trillion in the store, because no, you're not going to see it, So if you want it to be a business, you've got to be ready to grind and boots on the ground. It's going to be a lot of work, and you've got to have really thick skin, because people are kind of mean. Okay. Like Goodreads is the devil. So you just have to have a thick skin and just keep trying. Persistence is key.
Perseverance, yes, that is, yes, exactly. And resilience are critical to self-publishing. What do you think has been a key to your individual success as a self-publisher?
What has been key?
You know why this question's hard? Because we wear so many hats.
Yeah. For sure.
And it varies from person to person. Like certain things he's really good at, which are key components of his business plan, are things I can't do at all, and things I might be good at, he sucks at, or whatever. But it's so individual, right? And there's so many different things you have to be good at. And that's one of the reasons why we probably like it, because you don't get bored as easy. I get bored so easy. So this job works for me because I'm always doing something different, right?
Yeah. I think kind of with me, just like what you said, one of the reasons it's a little more difficult for me to pinpoint one thing is because I'm kind of throwing eggs at the wall, and trying to see what sticks. And what sticks is, things going well. So I can't always necessarily be like, okay, when I did this, this is what made it go well. I just know that I tried as many different things as possible, and some of those things worked, and sometimes, you have to sit back and go through and filter through and sift when you're doing your analytics and that type of thing to see what actually it made it happen. But in general, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I know this has been working for me before because of my background in rap music. I'm gonna keep trying this. I know one of these things are making it happen. It might not be this, it might not be that, but I know it's one of these things. So it's a little difficult for me to like.
Well, and I think that's where being really clear, I tell all of the people that I work with, why do you want to self-publish a book? What are your goals for doing this? And if you think that you're going to be the next Stephen King, I am sorry to tell you that you probably aren't. And will that be okay for you if you aren't? I mean, you might be. It's theoretically possible. It's statistically improbable, but it's theoretically possible. But I think, I tell all the clients that I work with to get very clear on what their goals are. Is it X number of sales by X date? Is it how many speaking engagements do you want to do this year? What kind of reviews do you care about reviews? What do you care about?
It's okay if you don't know that at the start.
It is
Because
okay.
when I started out, I was like so green. I didn't know what I wanted, right? Like I just wanted to write some books and have people read them and send me an email, and that's okay too. But you're right. Obviously, you're right. She knows what she's talking about. You do need to know what your goals are. But if you don't know them when you start out, don't stress about that. Just kind of, you have to just get out there and start doing stuff to like learn, right?
Well,
Like,
that's the thing. You can kind of talk yourself into a corner and never do anything.
well, that's true.
For sure. So at a certain point, you do have to make the leap. I just always advise my clients to take an educated leap and not a blind one. Because if you spend a lot of money to produce a book and you don't get the return on investment, you're going to be very disappointed. So, if you really are going to hire a team to work on your books, you need to know what the yardstick is for success there.
And what's that quote that's like, everyone overestimates what they can do in a year, but underestimates what they can do in 10? Like, that's so true. Like, all of us want it right now, like, oh, I got this great book. This should be happening. I've got these even 3 books, 4 books, 5 books. This should be happening. It might not, and that's okay. It's steady and slow. I mean, I didn't start seeing consistency until several years in. I published my first book in 2017, and I went, woo, bah, woo, bah, so just like, don't try to think you can get it all done right away in a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's a business, right? So you can have your plans, just know it might take a while, and that's okay.
Like, so just to build on what you said, like, this is not a get rich quick scheme at all. It might not even be a get rich period scheme.
It's an expensive hobby for a very long time.
It is. It's just something that you have to like. I'm when I do this, I'm in it for the long run. I'm in it for the long haul. As long as I know that I have a particular goal that I'm working toward, and that's being self-sufficient from the art that I create. That's what I'm going toward. And it might not happen today, it might not happen tomorrow, but I know that this is actually what I want to do and what I care and what I'm passionate about. Being able to sustain myself off of it is just something that is required because we live in a society, But beyond that, I'm just happy.
You're not independently wealthy.
Yeah, so I know what I'm working toward, and I'm satisfied by doing that, and so as long as you're not trying to rush things, and the same thing that you were saying about overestimating what you can do in a year, I literally went through that same thing this year. I started going on a comic convention tour. I was traveling to a bunch of different states doing this stuff, and next thing I know, I kind of got like hooked on booking events. And next thing I know, I'm like, hey, I need to go to sleep. This is a whole lot to do. So I wish actually that's something I'm taking with me myself when I leave here is like, maybe try to be more realistic about the amount of work that you can get done in a year.
It's like a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah,
all those sayings, on the cat poster.
Yeah, exactly. All those inspirational posters. A lot of them actually end up being true. I just interviewed another successful self-published author last week, Brett Newskey, and that was one of the things that he said is that it's a slow burn, and that you do have to be patient. Patience is key. It will not happen overnight. But if you steadily work at it,
Consistency.
You know, consistency is big. Yes.
I was just telling a friend of mine, he makes music, and I'm working with him on doing some video direction and that type of thing. And we were talking about the song that he wants to do a video for, and it's a really good song. It's a banger, you know. And he's like, "Man, this is the one. This is the one." I'm like, "It could be the one, but you don't need to look at it like this. You have a talent. This isn't the only song you're going to make of this caliber. So rather than trying to put all your eggs in this one basket, just be consistent, be focused on consistently making good work, and eventually one of them will be the one." But if you're like, "Man, Forever Juvie is the song that's going to get me on," you know, and then it doesn't get you on, then you're like left with this feeling of like disappointment, like you failed, and you didn't fail. That's just not the way that things work typically, you know.
Switching gears a little bit, I'm very interested in the topic of inclusiveness in publishing and how traditional publishing is historically not very inclusive. And so one of the questions that I had is, what doors do you think self-publishing opens for people who have often been underrepresented in traditional publishing?
Let me dwell on this. You go first.
I feel like you should go on the spoiled white girl. Probably shouldn't answer.
Well, being in control of your own artwork. You know, sometimes not even just in books. So there are certain things that, for instance, like I'm going to speak from the perspective of a Black man because that's what I am. There are times when it's like people are like, "Man, that might rub folks the wrong way," or "You don't want to put people off. Let's kind of tone this down so you don't want to alienate anyone," you know. And if what I'm saying or what I'm trying to do isn't actually offensive, it's, you know, reality, at least in how I see it, I don't feel like I should have to turn that down or minimalize anything that I have going or who I am or the art that I'm working on. So when you do self-publishing, it's significantly more work, but you don't have to worry about someone being like, "Hey, you don't need to talk about communism or anti-capitalism in your stuff." That might push people away from your thing. And regardless of however you feel about that, if that's what you want to tell and that's what you want to talk about, you have the freedom to do that with self-publishing.
Yeah, you have the freedom to broach topics that, you know, if you had an agent, they might be like, "I don't know if that's on brand." Yeah, you can be like, "I don't care," you know, like if it's true to your heart, it's going to become part of your brand anyway. So you just have that freedom, for better or worse. So be careful.
Yeah.
Make yourself look real dumb.
Exactly. How much time do we have left? Okay. I think that you guys have answered all the questions that I had, but I know that we had wanted to open it up to audience Q&A here at the end of our time. So I already see a hand up. Okay. So yes, sir.
2 questions. I'm sorry, is it Alisha?
Yes, sir.
No. You mentioned vellum. Could you talk about that? And then second of all, I think you and Julian, maybe I'm not clear if your exclusive source of income is through self-publishing, but I think Alisha, you said it was. Could you talk about what got you to that point?
There are so many things. Okay, well, Vellum is a program for Mac. I think they have it for PC now, but I don't remember. I'm looking at you like if you know.
Yeah, I actually don't know.
I'm a MacBook person, so that's all I know. Sorry, but so yeah, it's just it's software that you buy, and it's a lump sum now. When they started in beta is when I got it, so it was a little different. So I don't remember what the cost is, but I want to say $250, $300, and it is so user friendly. So this is for creating a novel. Okay, it is not. I mean, you can do images and whatnot, but it's not very image friendly. It's set up for novelists, I think, from what I understand in my usage. So you basically take a Word doc, you drag it to their little icon, and boom, it's a formatted ebook, formatted print book. I can change all of it, and there's just little menus. I mean, it's so easy, dude. Like, it's like you can go to this thing and be like, "I want it to be an 8.5 by 5." I'm not good at numbers, but this size of a paperback. And oh, look, I'm going to make it double spaced. And oh, that font looks terrible. Let's do this font. And they have packages for you so you don't look like a fool font wise, because you know that's a thing. There was an SNL skit about it, right? So like fonts are real. So they have like packages set up so you can just pick. It's like brainless, you know, it's super easy.
So what can it do that Word doesn't do?
Oh, Word's a nightmare. Do not format your book in Word. You will hate yourself, and it will be a nightmare.
Don't ever format
Because
your novel in Word.
I mean, you can, obviously you can, but it's a giant pain. And Vellum takes the problems out of it. So if I try to format stuff in Word, which for starters I wouldn't, because I don't know how to do all that. I used to hire somebody to do that before Vellum existed, but it was very expensive. And when you're producing 3, 4, 5 books a year, you use it. So when I upload to KDP to Amazon, those files, it's set up for doing that. It's specifically for self-publishers. So you can upload that to Ingram Spark. You can upload this one to Amazon, upload this one to KDP Print. It just takes the guesswork out of it because it is a lot harder than one would think. I don't know your experience, so I don't want to talk down to anybody, but it's a lot harder to format than one would think. You can get this tiny little dumb problem and you'll be up till 3 a.m. and you'll be like, so yeah. VELLUM. It's like medieval calf skin. Anyway, I could nerd out.
I used to format books in InDesign, and it is very difficult, and I don't do that anymore for all the obvious reasons.
Oh God, I hate all that. Your other question was something about making money.
Making money.
Okay, so my best simple advice would be play around with your writing, figure out where your passion overlaps commercial audience. Do not do genre mashups. I know you think it's cool, but you're a writer. Readers don't do it. You can do it later. You can mash all the stuff to heck. Oops, I gotta watch my mouth. Anyway, later, once you have an audience, but you've got to show people what your brand is. They've got to understand what you're going to give them, what they're going to get. So you've got to be consistent, that consistency thing again. So I would do a series in a very, you have read a ton of books in that subgenre. Like not just fantasy, but I'm doing fantasy romance, which is different than epic fantasy or romantic fantasy. Yes, it's all different. Like fantasy romance, dual POV, third person past. It needs to have a couple on the cover. Like, I mean, there's very specific things that you want to research because you're competing with bajillions of people. So if the reader doesn't like just scan right past your book on Amazon and know what it is right away, and that's the book they want, they're going to skate right past it. It doesn't matter how awesome you are. It stinks, but that's how it is. So series, research your subgenre and stick with it for a while.
And actually, you just spoke to something too, which is the importance of good cover design. You cannot skimp on cover design. You have seconds to grab a reader with your cover design. You might think that you can do something like that yourself. Don't. Do not. A good cover design, a good professional cover design is worth every single nickel you'll spend on it. It's one of the things that I drill into my authors. I'm like, don't think that you can just go out into whatever the PC Paint program is and put a cover on your book. Like you could do that. Yeah. But it's not going to be good.
Any books you see that did well like that, it was like 5-10 years ago. I mean, even as short as 3 years ago, it's different. It is highly competitive now. Like people came to play.
I know for me, when I'm at comic conventions and stuff like that, people who approach my table are not approaching my table because of my prose. They've not read anything that I've written. They're coming up to my table because of the artwork that they see. Now, my stuff is a little more art-centric, visual art-centric. But still, at the end of the day, it's a big banner of my book cover or pictures of my characters and that type of stuff. And that's what draws people over. And then, I would like to think that it's my writing that keeps them there. So just to build on what you were saying, another thing that I would add to that is being able to draw a degree of separation between yourself and the other people that are doing it, because there are so many people that are doing it. And just how we've been saying that with self-publishing, anyone can do it. I like to look at it like with self-publishing, everyone is doing it. So if you want to be able to stand out from the fray, you have to figure out how to separate yourself. And one of those things is stuff like good cover art, because you would be surprised about how many people don't care about having good cover art. It'll be really bad.
Or they do it wrong for the genre. Like you can be creative in your storytelling and maybe a little with your cover. Oh, I like that so much better, actually. But you cannot be super creative with a book cover. Now, I don't know about, maybe graphic novels are a little more flexible with that because it's such an artistic bent. But like with book covers, you really like, don't be like, I'm going to do it different than everybody. Yeah, well, you're not going to sell any books. Like, that's fine if you want to do that. But just remember, hobby or business, what are you doing? You know?
Do we have an, oh,
Doesn't matter, Ericka or Alisha or Julian. A lot of people recommend having a blog. What are your thoughts on having a blog? Do you have a blog?
So for me, Instagram is my
So
blog.
you use that as your blog?
I was just nodding.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Ericka can probably speak on the blogging stuff more.
Yeah, I think a blog is content marketing. So if you're not going to follow good content marketing principles, and if you don't even know what content marketing is, you may not want to get into blogging. Blogging is kind of like social media presence, which is you have to be consistent with it. If you're going to post a blog every week, then you need to post a blog every week. And that's how you build a following. And if you're not going to feed it, it'll starve to death and it'll be a waste of time. Blog tours are really popular with self-published authors. And that's, again, it's a good way to get your name out there, especially when you're starting out. But it's one of those things that you need to do consistently and strive for quality, because if you do it haphazardly, you won't get anywhere with it.
And I think it depends on what genre you're writing into. Yeah. If you're writing nonfiction, I think blogs are still pretty viable. Like if you're writing fiction, I kind of quit my blog about, 2 years ago. I probably should still do it because it auto feeds onto your Amazon product page and actually creates metadata. But that's kind of up here. I won't talk about that right now. But I think the only way I would start a blog today is if I'm writing nonfiction and ready to do it consistently like that. For fiction, I really wouldn't mess with it.
Right. And you had a question?
Yeah, similar to Ericka, I'm also a self-publishing specialist with BookBaby, and a lot of authors come to me under the impression that writing is the hardest part of the process. So that when they get into the publishing process, they realize that there are so many obstacles and hurdles, and they find that frustrating, and they get like stuck and don't want to move forward. So can you talk about what your methods are for digging yourself out of those trenches and overcoming those obstacles?
I knew you were about to come with the questions.
Yeah, I have to go get some coffee.
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question because to me, I've never really felt like writing was the hardest part. Whenever I'm in ruts and I need to get some extra motivation or attack something that I think is posing an obstacle for me, I usually suffer. To be frank, I usually like stress over it, and this is probably not the way to handle it at all. I stress over it. I think over these things until I see a moment where usually I actually go back to my writing. So I go because that's like my safe space in the whole realm of this is the actual creation and the writing and the world building, So I'll go back to that. Actually, my friend John right here is somebody that I consult quite often, and we'll just be on the phone and we'll throw ideas back and forth to each other about the stories themselves. And then I get excited again because that's really what I'm wanting to do at the end of the day is write. So then I get excited again about what's going on, and I get to look at these obstacles from a fresh perspective, and I don't feel that weight on my shoulder of like, oh, I got to do this, or how do I do this, or how do I learn how to do this? So actually, we're going back to what makes you happy and why you want to do it, for me, is what gives me the extra push to break through those walls.
Yeah, I think community is really important for emotional support because it is emotional. You're creating art from your heart, and this is a tough job, and you feel very lone wolf about it. I also would say, more cheesy quotes. I don't remember if this is from like a Pixar movie or something I saw written on a bathroom wall. But it's like, do the next right thing. Like, that's what the queen of overwhelm over here. I try to just be like, okay, nothing exists. What's my next step right in front of me? Just do that. Like, I don't have to know how to do build this whole platform. Okay, I finished a book. What's next? Okay, I need a complete product. So don't worry about ads and websites. Just go hire an editor. And then when you're done with that, what's the next step? So just chill.
I think, you said the word community. Writing community is really important. But I think the great thing about the self-publishing community is that it is a community, and you can find like-minded people, and you can prop each other up. I think also the thing that I tell all my authors to do is to get an accountability partner. I have one. I wouldn't have written a page in the last year if I didn't. Find someone who's in, the same vein that you are, and draft off of each other. You don't have to go it completely alone. There's a full community of people, and there's lots of free resources too. You were talking about podcasts and all that stuff. There's tons of resources. You just have to seek them out.
I don't know if you guys will agree with this, but another thing when I'm looking at this and when I go through this is that kind of like what you're saying, take it one step at a time. There's no at least in my experience, there's no time period, there's no rush to get it done. The main important part is getting it done correctly, so don't worry about rushing and, I got to have this by next month so I can do this. Don't worry about that. Just focus on getting done what you can get done at the absolute highest level that you can do it. And that'll really help you as well. There's no rush.
Do we have any more questions?
Alisha, this is for you because you can answer if you want, but everyone else I already know you.
He's sick of you.
How long were you writing and being in the traditional publishing route before you started self-publishing?
Well, I started writing just for fun when my now 16-year-old was an infant. So I started writing books, a while back. Of course, I was writing when I was a kid, like a lot of us do too, like winning little writing contests, and I was all excited. But I didn't get serious with it with traditional. I think I had my agent in 2014. I'm looking at you like you know. I just met her today. She doesn't know, folks. I don't know. What is time? I think it was 2014. I got an agent. 15. Don't quote me on that. It's something like that. And I queried 3 books before I got an agent. I mean, you could fill this whole room with the rejections. But then eventually I started getting partial requests every time I sent out. So that's when I started winning contests.
Can you explain that a little more?
Too.
Partial requests?
Okay, so when you have a manuscript, you send out a letter to agents. And it's called a query letter or a query letter. People say it all different ways. Anyway,
Query.
You send it out. It's hell on earth. And they read your first couple pages or whatever it is. It's been so long, I can't remember. And then most of them just don't reply to you at all. But some of them will reply and say, I would love to see the first 50 pages. And that's a partial request. Some of them will do a full request and they want the whole manuscript. Some of them will sit on that manuscript for as many years as there are in the world. So don't hold your breath. Okay. They do not care about you, even if they're great people, because they get so many emails, right? So don't take it personally. But yeah, so I don't remember where this all started. What?
How long were you doing traditional before you went to self?
Right. So I never published traditional. I quit before that. Quit's the wrong word. I chose another path.
Exactly.
But I didn't like people telling me what I should write. And they tried to be a little more influencing about that. And I really just don't like, and it was so slow. You're sitting there on sub for a year. I'm like, what is this? If this is how this goes, I just can't really jam with that. And I have a lot of friends that are traditionally published. Some of them are very happy. A lot of them are not. But I saw that. I saw the ugly behind the scenes stuff too. And I'm like, Anyway, so a few years, I guess I would say.
Traditional publishing is notoriously slow. And if you're someone like Alisha who wants to put out 3 or 4 or 5 books a year, you will die in traditional publishing.
And I don't write literary. My stuff is very commercial. It's Lord of the Rings, but with more making out, right? So that's very commercial. Yay, Pirates of the Caribbean.
That was actually a great elevator pitch too, which
Right, I should put that on my website.
You really should. You really, really should. You need a really great, 10-word elevator pitch. So find what it is. Find your Lord of the Rings with more making out. That's critical.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't remember what we were talking about. I'm derailed.
I think we have another question from the back.
You talk about cover design and artwork. what are your feelings about 99 Design, Fliver, those kinds of services, or do you have other?
One of my cover designers is actually on 99 Designs. Now I don't think she actually started there, but I actually love that platform because they save all your files. It's all right there. Everything's recorded. Because even when somebody's a cool person to work with, they have days when they're not cool. And they tell you something different about getting that Photoshop file. Now they want another $100 for it. And so it's nice to have everything recorded. So I think those sites are great, but I really strongly suggest you find the community first. You can even just cold message somebody as long as you don't ask to be in their newsletter. Don't be doing that. But if you just like have an author you look up to that's self-published, you message them and be like, hey, where do you suggest I go look? Because they'll be in the genre you're writing in, right? If you're doing this right. And you can be like, who's a good cover designer I could go to? Or do you have some suggestions? That's what I would do. I don't hire anybody unless someone I trust already worked with them.
That's a really good point that she made as far as just reaching out to other authors and asking them stuff. So many of the advancements and things that I would consider accomplishments that I've had since doing this literally just came from me asking if it would happen. You would really be surprised at how many times if you just ask someone, the answer is yes. I ended up being featured, thankfully in the Speed Art Museum in Louisville. This is the first book I've ever published. The Speed did a whole feature on it. That came from me simply just asking one of the directors at the Speed, hey, I make a comic book. This is it. Could I be here? And he was like, yes. Before that, I never would have thought that something like that would have been possible. So if there's something out there and if you want it, just ask for it. The answer may be no, there may be no answer at all, but the answer could be yes too. And what you were saying about like Fiverr. So exactly what you just said. I've done both of those things. So my main illustrator, I met on Upwork. I put out a listing, like 40 or 50 different people applied. I narrowed it down to a couple, sent them all the same 2-page script. And based on what they sent back to me is how I found Aggie. We've now been working together for 5 or 6 years. He quit his day job, does this exclusively. For Kale, my concept artist, who now is consistently employed by Marvel and DC. He's done like 70 covers for them in the last year and a half. When I met him, he only had a little over 1,000 followers, and it was on Instagram. And I literally just messaged him on Instagram like, hey, man, I will pay you. Can you draw for me? And what people don't know is that artists like to get paid for their stuff. So if you tell them that you'll pay them, there's a lot of times they'll do what you want them to do,
Yes, if you hire freelancers, pay them fairly and pay them on time. I am a full-time freelancer. My creditors don't take promises. Good places to find freelancers. The Editorial Freelancers Association and also Readsy are both pretty good places to find freelancers for design, copy editing, proofreading, all of those things. And word of mouth is good too. Authors Guild, any writing community that you're part of, ask your friends who they've used and who they've liked.
And if anybody wants, I'm happy to give out my author email. If you want an idea of some groups on Facebook that you want to, because it's kind of specific to what you're writing. So if I have any help I can give of what groups to go to, then I'd be happy to do that. I'm not reading anyone's book. I love you. But I can't do that. You know how it is. I've already got a bajillion people I know, which is awesome. But once you do this for a while, you know a lot of people. So it's hard. But I'd be happy to give out hey, you should probably read this book. I don't have any stake or claim in it, but I think it would help. Or check out this podcast, or here's some Facebook groups you can join to get to know some people, to find your people.
Oh, and another great resource for self-publishers, it's a thing called Free Advice Fridays. It's a webcast every Friday morning at 10 a.m. New Shelves Books hosts it. And it's great. You can submit your questions ahead. It's all free. You can submit your questions in the chat. If they know the answer, they'll help you find it. There are lots of great resources in the self-publishing community, and you don't even have to pay a lot of money for any of them.
Most of them are free.
Yeah, a lot of them are free. It's a really grassroots kind of friendly community once you decide to become a part of it, which is great, and welcome aboard. I think we might be done. I see my room monitor. I don't know. Are we out of time? We're still good? Okay. Did we have any other questions? I have no idea what time it is. For editorial work, for copy editing, development editing, proofreading, it's the Editorial Freelancers Association. of which I am a member. But I'm a member because they're one of the best organizations for editorial freelancers. I have been an editorial freelancer for 10 years. Not everyone who hangs their shingle out as a freelancer is as skilled as they claim to be. That's the great thing about Readsy is they do a little more vetting of the vendors who they list on their site too, because lots of people, they hang a shingle out and say they're a designer or say they're an editor, and they aren't necessarily. It's also really important to get clear definitions of the service that you are being provided. People use terms interchangeably. Some people will say line edit when they mean development edit. Some people will say copy edit when they mean proofread. You need to be very clear on what those definitions are. And actually, I have it listed on the homepage of my website to make it very clear to any potential client, like, what does this entail? Because you need to know, and you need to know what you're paying for, and you need to know if you've gotten what you've paid for. If did the proofreader find all the typos, or did they just scrawl editorial comments all over your pages? It matters, especially when you're putting up the money yourself. That's where the education comes in. You really have to educate yourself and learn as much as you can about all of this stuff you never imagined you'd have to learn anything about before. Welcome aboard. It's great here.
What's your website?
My website is ericcamcintyre.com.
Ericka with CK.
Ericka with a CK. That's right. Your name is your strongest brand. That's another little branding tip I'll leave you guys with today. Your name is your strongest brand.
Writer's Digest?
I'm an editor at large for Writer's Digest. Yes, I'm a former editor in chief of Writer's Digest, and now I am an editor at large there.
Do they vet all their commercials in the book or advertisements?
No. If somebody pays for an ad, they get placed in the magazine. Now, that being said, they don't let just anyone advertise in the magazine. I mean, there is a certain amount of vetting that goes along, but those are paid advertisements. So,
Guys, like, I literally, if I liked a book and wanted to hire their editor or cover designer, I would email them, DM them on Instagram, whatever. I would find them and just ask them, like, who did you use?
well, and check the acknowledgments, because a lot of I am listed as editor in a lot of books acknowledgments. If you find a book in a genre by an author and you really like how they did it, it's just like you said, email them, ask them who they hired.
Because if that editor's busy, they might even be able to bump you to someone else that they know.
Was that it? Are we done? Do we have any more questions? I want to make sure everybody got their questions answered, but I think we're out of time. I see people approaching me from the other side of the room. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you to our room sponsor, UK Healthcare. Thank you to Kentucky Humanities for putting this great festival on. And thank you both to Alisha and Julian for coming here and talking to us
so much.
today.
Thanks so.